Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming along. This is the first show and tell for the new project for replatforming the Managed Tenancy Hub. So this is going on in parallel with us finishing off replatforming the processes in order to be able to make them work offline. So that work's all carrying on together. In this session, we're going to do a brief introduction to the team. We're going to talk about what the overall project vision and goals are, how this fits in with other pieces of work that are happening in relation to this around the council, and then we'll talk specifically about what we have achieved in this sprint. So some of the design work that we've been doing, thinking about how we're going to structure a little bit briefly about our technical architecture, but much more about how we think about how the different bits of data in this are structured together. Then we're going to have a live demo of the fantastic stuff we've managed to achieve already in the first 2 weeks of the project, and then talk about what's next, and then have some time for questions at the end. So this is the team. Lorraine is our product owner. Jill does our design work and works very closely with our user group to get feedback. We're very keen to get feedback as soon as possible from people. That's why we do the 2 weekly sprints, so we can incorporate that into doing some updates. Ben is our sort of overall technical guru and architect, and oversees what we're doing from that kind of point of view, and also sees how it fits in with the other pieces of work that are being done elsewhere in the council. I'm the delivery manager, so I basically follow people around going, is it done yet? And then we've got our excellent development team. So we've got Tony and Stu and Anna, Tomo and Chris, who are doing the real work of providing the actual thing that people are going to be working with. So this is our overall vision. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it essentially says that we're going to extend Single View, which is an excellent service that our third-party partners at MaT have built for benefits and housing needs as part of the transformation that they're doing there, which has included lots of really good new digital services, but also some quite creative new thinking that's been brought on board from FutureGov. And by extending Single View and introducing a new version of the Managed Tenancy Hub and a related work tray that people can work out of every day, we're going to be able to move away from our existing service, which is based on OutSystems, which we want to do before the licenses expire by the end of September, which is going to save us a lot of money. And as I said before, it's really important for us to get continuous feedback from the housing officers and area housing managers all through the project to make sure that we're delivering the right kind of thing. So these are our goals. So we want to get housing officers and area housing managers access to Single View. And Single View is all about being able to see information from multiple existing services all in one place. Then we're going to add some tenancy-specific information to Single View, and then we're going to have this reusable work tray component, of which we've got a very early demo already, which we're going to have today, which is fantastic. And then we're going to do a little bit around ETRA to move the remaining parts of that OutSystems away from there. And then we're going to do some work to make sure that the way that we can build on top of this from a technical point of view is easier in the future, because it's been quite difficult up to now. And then we're going to make sure, lastly, that we're still supplying the right reporting information to people, so we don't break anything by moving off OutSystems. And I'm going to hand over to Ben, who's going to talk a little bit about how this is connected to other pieces of work that's going on around Hackney. Ben, over to you.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Ben from MaT. I'm a tech lead there. MaT are doing, I think, 4, soon to be 5 different projects at Hackney at the moment. And one of the things that I'm trying to do is just sort of tie together a lot of these different work streams so that there's a kind of cohesiveness between them. For this particular project, there are sort of 3 work streams really that come together. There's, as David mentioned, so Single View came out of the work for housing needs, which is a project that's been going on for almost a year now. and that's starting to spread into different areas of Hackney, including sort of the call center coming up as well. And that's an application that lets you sort of view all of the data about a person in one place. And managed tenancy is obviously going to be using that to kind of display the data about the tenancy, which will involve some changes. One of the other projects, the Platform API project, exposing the data in Hackney in a kind of reusable way. Now, one of the key things there is making sure that the data that we expose is actually needed by applications. So this is a perfect opportunity to make sure that the work we do there is reusable and actually aligned with what we need to be able to display in single view and in managed tenancy. So yeah, it's mainly about tying these things together and kind of sort of a bit of cross-pollination between the different work streams to benefit Hackney, really. Back to you, David.
I think you're on mute, David.
Thank you. What a muppet. Right. Yeah, there are several good things about this. Partly, obviously, it saves us money if we can reuse things, so we don't have to kind of rebuild the same things over and over again. But also, there's a real benefit from having consistency. So we want our users to be able to have a way of interacting with things in a consistent way, rather than having the current situation where you've got to move between lots of different systems. So we want to make things as easy as possible. And also, by bringing things together, it means that when we need to do updates for various reasons, we can do those in one place rather than having to do them across lots of different places. And as Ben was saying about the platform APIs, they're basically a way of enabling us to provide information to lots of different systems that people might interact with, and by consolidating all our information about particular concerns in one place, we remove a lot of inconsistency of having slightly different information about a person, say at a resident's address, in different systems, and getting things out of date where they might move, for example. The more that we consolidate information into one place, the less we have those kind of problems. So there's lots of good stuff happening in this area. I was just going to move on now to talk about some design stuff. So can I hand over to Jill?
Hi, thanks, David. Yeah, so past couple of weeks I've been doing some remote testing with housing officers in particular on some of the designs for the kind of work tray and that page that the work tray fits on. So the things that we were testing was that how it would respond in different devices and in different orientations of those devices. So with the tablet that housing officers use when they're out and about on estates, look at it in landscape view, or if they look at it in portrait view, how does the page respond? And also looking at it if their iPads pack up for some reason, but they've got to carry on and get that visit done, what it might look like if they had to do it on their mobile phone in portrait view. So we also tested some different options for selecting what's being displayed in the work tray, such as using tabs to do that, or radio buttons or drop downs on a mobile view. We also tested what the work tray items look like in those different ways for a portrait view. So if you're looking at it on your phone or on your tablet in portrait view, what happens to that table at the bottom? This is often a difficult thing to give the best option for. So it looks at a couple of options there. So whether they've just stayed in their rows and the person had to do some scrolling sideways to see everything that was in that table, or whether we could change it so it was more of a kind of tile or card view of each of those work items. So when switching it to the tile view, I got the labels for each of the items. Apart from, we've got a couple of dates in there, so I think it was important to kind of distinguish between the two dates. So the first one is the created date, which seems fairly obvious, and the second one is a due or completed date. So we also tested some new features to see whether they were understood and useful. So we've got a completed this month, which is a quick view of how many tenants and household checks and home checks processes have been done during the month. And these are KPIs for the housing officer. So that was useful to get some feedback on that. We've also added the due and completed dates, and to give an indication of whether they were due soon or whether they might be overdue, we used some icons, and that was being tested during this time as well. And very late on testing, we've added a little plus icon, which is a way of showing how the action, it reveals some extra information which shows how the action is linked to its parent process. Do you want the next slide, David? Okay, so this is what kind of came out of the testing. There was some great feedback, and really gave a quite clear steer about which direction people wanted us to go in. So definitely tabs were preferred over to any other option for selecting what's being displayed in that work tray. It's a one-click option, and so that came out quite strongly. Completed by month, this feature was liked and was thought quite useful. It's a quick way to find out how much you've done this month, and how much more you need to be doing. In terms of the processes, the due and completed dates with the colour icon indicator, the feedback on this was a bit mixed. It was kind of generally understood. We went for showing a yellow, a kind of amber circle and a red triangle. And some people thought that perhaps if there were different shapes, they might be kind of meaning different things. So not necessarily kind of related to due dates. So I think we need to do a bit more work on that, just to do a bit more testing, see if we can get more of a consensus on the way forward on that. And the plus icon, which came in quite late. People sort of understood what that meant, but I think, again, we need to do a bit more testing around that. And then the tiles view in the work tray for the portrait view on devices. I mean, the feedback on that was overwhelming, that they didn't want, people didn't want to scroll sideways when looking at it in that orientation. They felt that the kind of tile view was easy to understand the content that was in there. There was no need for any additional labels. I was a bit concerned about scanning that information, how easy it would be to scan, but generally people thought that that wasn't going to be a problem, even if there were a large number of items in there. And they're also in the phone view of portrait view of the phone. I closed up some content on that page, and again, people thought that they was happy. It was there if they needed it, but it didn't need to be displayed. So generally, great feedback, and as I said, real kind of clear steer in the direction we should go, and a couple of bits that we probably need to do a bit more work on. Over to you, David.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Jill. It's just really great that we've got a user group that we can reach out to that's giving us really constructive feedback really rapidly. It allows us to be able to improve our designs as we go along, so incredibly useful. So the next thing on here is Stu talking a little bit about some of the decisions that we've made in terms of design. So over to Stu.
Thanks, David. So I am Stu McKellar. I'm a lead engineer from MaT, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the architecture that we've decided on. So I appreciate this is quite a tech-heavy slide, and we've got a mixed audience here, so I'll try and keep it light if possible. If anyone does have any questions, then please just shout out. So this is sprint one. This is really about getting us set up and making some decisions and really setting the scene for the whole project. There's less user-facing work here, although we've actually got quite a lot done. As you've just seen, we'll see more of in a minute. We'll see much more of that in later show and tells. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the decisions we have made, because they're sort of quite fundamental and important. And there's lots of different ways we could have done this. We've got a set of user requirements or user needs, and there's lots of different ways we could build it. So what we've chosen to do is create a completely new app for manager tenancy, so a web app. You've just seen there some of the screenshots that Jill's been working on, the designs, and we'll flesh that out a lot more, obviously, in the coming weeks. We're also building a dedicated API, which is just a way of collecting and presenting the data that's required in that application. The idea there is that sort of it encapsulates everything all together. It keeps it all nicely tight and focused, and we don't have to worry about other things changing and breaking things. We're also building this work tray component as a sort of a reusable component that can be shared elsewhere. So we're aware that other parts of the council have potentially similar requirements. So we want this to be reusable and for other people to be able to pick it up and use it. And sort of all the work we do here to also be for the benefit of other parts of the council who want to do similar things. We'll integrate with single view. So we're not going to be part of single view, but we'll sit alongside it, as Ben talked about earlier. And that should be as seamless as possible. So you should be able to switch between those two different applications very easily. In terms of the goals for the project, our primary goal, and because it's time-based, is to decommission the current OutSystems hub, which we need to do by the end of September. So to do that, we will sort of take a slightly tactical approach in the sense that we will just do whatever it takes to get over that line as quickly as possible. And the idea is we'll get to feature parity with what's currently in the OutSystems hub as soon as we can. A secondary goal is then to go back once we've reached that stage and just tidy things up and make sure that we're sort of aligned with the wider technical strategy for the borough. So that involves making sure, as Ben pointed out, that we're using reusable services for acquiring data, and that again we don't get broken by other changes down the line. And that's sort of, you can see that there in that diagram. We're sort of changing the way that we access data over time. So we'll start off getting data from databases directly, which is not a great way to do it because things can change and and cause issues. And instead, we'll sort of over time we'll slowly migrate to using these strategic APIs that Ben talked about. Does anyone have any questions on any of that? No. Okay.
I was going to say, could I ask a really quick question about the feature parity?
Sure.
Have we assumed that all the features in the current hub are still features that we definitely want to keep, or do we have any research that shows that actually there are some that aren't used or that we don't need?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, one of the activities we've done this sprint is a full design review of the existing application and service to see or to check whether everything is still being used. So we've actually identified a few things that we know aren't being used and aren't required. So we're going to get rid of those, simplify. And yeah, probably as part of the secondary phase, there'll be additional stuff that we might want to do that's an improvement perhaps over how things are currently done. But yeah, the initial goal is largely just to make sure that people who are using the OutSystems hub at the moment can continue to do the same thing. We're not interrupting their daily activities, and we can still get rid of OutSystems. Next slide, please, David. So this is really just an example of one of those sort of design review activities we did. We looked at how people manage their tasks on a day-to-day basis and whether we can simplify it and improve it. So this is quite abstract at the moment, and hopefully you'll see some of this come out in the actual designs later on. But what we're trying to do is simplify how the tasks that housing officers have to deal with on a daily basis, so processes and other actions, either related to processes or unrelated, how they're managed in a consistent way, just so that when people are using the app, it feels nice to use. It's intuitive, and you don't have to do different. If you're dealing with different types of process, you don't have to have a completely different user interface or a completely different paradigm for doing that work. So, like I say, this will hopefully emerge in later sprints when we'll see how this actually looks in terms of the UI. But broadly speaking, what we're trying to do is identify all the ways in which these things are similar, and make sure that we're then implementing them in a consistent way, while still allowing sort of differences for different types of actions, which may or may not make sense. But yeah, it's useful work, and hopefully we'll end up with a much better product at the end of it. And we've done a few of these different reviews, and we'll continue to do this and refine it as we go through the upcoming sprints. So I think that's probably it from me. David, back to you.
Cool, thanks very much. Yeah, so understanding how these things are all related up front is really important, because that then feeds into the design work that Jill does, which then in turn feeds into the development work, which we can then put in front of the user group when we've got the code actually running. So having these things all being worked out in advance enables us to be able to develop things that we can then get feedback on. So all these bits of different moving parts of the same software delivery machine. So it's great that these are all starting to line up. And now it's demo time. So I'm going to stop presenting. And then I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's going to walk through the fantastic stuff that we have achieved already in the first sprint. So if you'd like to share your screen, Chris.
So yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm Chris, working with MaT for Hackney. Let me just share my screen. Okay, is that sharing at the moment, or?
Yeah, it's just loading. That's it.
Brilliant. Yeah, so as Stu mentioned, with the kind of work tray UI element, the idea was to try and make it as reusable as possible, so that other services can pick it up. So we've been expanding on the current Hackney front-end React repository, which is published as an NPM package and can be pulled into other projects. So yeah, as you can see here, this is the kind of first pass for the first sprint that we've got. So the goal was to be able to view a set of work items in the work tray. So as part of our first pass, we've kind of got the thanks. So as part of the first pass, we've kind of got the ability to filter work items via in progress, completed, or just showing all of those items. We've also got the icons that Jill mentioned earlier about showing whether something is overdue or is almost due. And we've also got the ability to sort the data as well. And also as part of that kind of reusability, rather than just having one large work tray item, we've been splitting the work we've been doing down into smaller pieces so that individual parts can be reused as well. So for example, the tabs are a separate component which can be reused without needing the work tray, as well as the table and the sorting, which can be reused elsewhere without needing to use that work tray component. Yeah, and then I think Tuomo is going to go into some of the work we've been doing with the MaT UI and MaT API.
Yeah, so if you could, yeah. So basically what we did, we wanted to deploy our code to production as soon as possible. So we set up this kind of like a skeleton application. So we have this now running in production. But as you can see, there's not much there yet. But as soon as we get those new UI components, then this will start taking shape. So we have both the UI and then the API running in production that will actually then provide the data for the user interface. So we can just, in the coming sprints, we can quickly deploy new features live. And hand over back to David.
Cool, thanks so much. If you can stop sharing the screen, yeah, great. So it's really important that we are able to get the software that we're developing into our live production environment as soon as possible, because going back to how software used to be developed years ago, it was often the case that you would do a lot of work and then not actually put it into a live environment until right at the end, and then you discover lots of additional issues. So what we want to do is be able to make the things that we're developing go all the way through our development pipeline and into production. And the fact that we've got that running in the first sprint, and have also managed to develop a really good first pass of what the work tray is going to look like again in the first sprint, lines us up really well for the rest of the work. And having the designs in place to enable us to start doing more of the user interface work into the next sprint, everything feels like it's lined up really, really well. So in terms of what's next, what we want to do is we want to get housing officers, area housing managers, and appropriate folks from the contact center onto a single view. So we're getting that lined up at the moment. So there's more stuff obviously to do on the work tray, and again getting more feedback from the user group. So we're going to continue to simplify and improve how the back end of the code works, so that we can do future work more quickly and easily. And part of that is creating a new database that allows us to move away from using Microsoft Dynamics as the storage for some of our data. And then we're going to look into how we do, or how the housing officers do searching for information, and then how we're going to be able to supply that. And then we're also going to work in parallel with the people who are working on finishing the replatforming of Tenancy Household Check, Home Check, and ITV, to make sure that we're capable of connecting that work and this piece of hub work together in a way that works really well. So hopefully we'll be able to demo that in one of the upcoming show and tells. So those are the things we're going to be looking at in the next sprint. Any questions from anybody? No? All right, lovely. Okay, so we are always about, if you have any questions, please feel free to send them to me. If you are on the Slack, please just come and raise them in our channel. There'll be lots of further conversations between Jill and the user group, so we're looking forward to getting more continuous feedback. We'll have another show and tell in 2 weeks. In the meantime, this session's being recorded. I'll send it around to everybody, and if the area housing managers can pass it on to their housing officers, that'd be really appreciated. Yeah, and if there's anything that you'd like to know, any more questions, then please just do get in touch, and we'll look forward to doing the next version 2 weeks from now.